يا إمام الرسل يا سندي أنت باب الله معتمدي فبدنياي وآخرتي يا رسول الله.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. After praising Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala, Malik Kainat, Khalik Kul, Badi'us Samawati wal Ard, and sending infinite peace and salutations, durood and salawat upon the best of creation, the light of humanity, the purpose of our existence, Sayyidul Awwaleen wal Akhirin, Imam al-Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Huzur Jane Jana, Tajdar Medina, Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, most honorable and respectable elders, brothers and sisters, lovable youngsters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. From amongst the essentials of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in terms of i'tiqad, creed and beliefs, which are categorically proven from either the verses of the Quran or the ahadith mubarakah of Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And like this, the ijma of the Sahaba, A'imma and the Ummah are beliefs which don't make an individual a disbeliever, a kafir, but rather that individual becomes gumrah, misguided, and has false beliefs and incorrect faith. From amongst these beliefs, yani zururiyati ahli sunnati wal jama'ah, the essentials of the ahli sunnati wal jama'ah in terms of belief, are believing that the four rightly guided caliphs, the Khulafai Rashideen, the Khulafai Arba'ah, were the rightful successors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and bit tartib, as is the order of the khilafat, that is also the order of the afdaliyat as well. Yani Abu Bakr as-Siddiq ka pehla number, Umar Farooq ka दूजा number, Usman Ghani ka तीजा number, and Maulai Kainat, Maulai Kul, Sayyiduna Ali Murtaza, Karramallahu Ta'ala Wajhul Kareem ka chotha number. That just as this is the tartib of khilafat, this is also the tartib of superiority and maqam martaba as well. This is from amongst the essential beliefs of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Like this, believing that the Shaykhain Karimain, Sayyiduna Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Sayyiduna Umar Farooq radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, have a higher and greater rank than all of the noble companions, and similarly their rank is the greatest in the ummah of Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And tafdeelu shaykhain, and like this hubbul khatanain, having love for the two son-in-laws of Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, yani Sayyidina Usman Ghani Dhun Nurain radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and Maulai Kainat Sayyidina Ali Murtaza karramallahu ta'ala wajhahul kareem. These are all essential beliefs of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. like this accepting the validity of consensus of the ummah, ijma, based upon the narration mentioned in Ibn Majah Sharif, Abu Dawud Sharif, that inna ummati la tajtami'u ala dalalatin فإذا رأيتم اختلافا فعليكم بالسواد الأعظم. Ravi Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that Huzur Jane Jana Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that indeed my nation, my ummah will never gather upon any form of misguidance, any form of deviance. فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ اخْتِلَافًا, and when you do see some sort of differences, ikhtilafat amongst you, then what should you do? فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالسَّوَادِ الْأَعْظَمِ, then you should hold on to the greater majority. For indeed majority is authority. So accepting and believing in ijma, consensus, this is from amongst the essential beliefs of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Punishment of the grave is a fact. Questioning in the grave is a fact. Deeds being weighed is a fact. Like this, believing that the Prophet ﷺ's night journey, Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, and we are now in those days leading up to that blessed night, which will be next Thursday. Thursday night will be the night of the 27th of Rajabul Murajjab, when our beloved Lajpal Nabi Kareem Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was taken from Al-Masjidul Haram to Al-Masjidul Aqsa. And then from Al-Masjidul Aqsa, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ascended, did Mi'raj through the heavenly worlds. Mera mawzu us taraf ta hai nahi na. Batore ishara, it will be related to that. But that's not my discussion for this week. But believing that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's journey that took place on the night of Mi'raj, 1 year before the Hijrah, that this was a physical journey. Yes. That al-jasadu ma'ar-ruh, that body with spirit. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't in terms of just a journey, in terms of spirit or soul. Rather, this was a physical journey where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with the physical eyes of his blessed head saw Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala. مَا ذَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى ثُمَّ دَنَا فَتَدَلَّى فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ أَوْ أَدْنَى فَأَوْحَى إِلَىٰ عَبْدِهِ مَا أَوْحَى. So this is a part of the Aqidah, an essential creed of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Believing that the Quran is Kalamullahi, the word of Allah Almighty, and not makhluk, not a creation. This is also from amongst the fundamental beliefs of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Respecting all of the noble companions, Ashab-e Rasul, and all of the esteemed members of the household of Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, yani Ahlul Bayt Athar, ye bhi Aqidah Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah hai. An extensive list here. This was just to mention a few, but also from amongst the essential aspects of creed and belief of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is believing and having this iman and aqidah that all of the anbiya, the prophets of Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala, are alive in their qubur. Tawajjuh hai na? And this is our discussion for today. 15-20 minutes that we have. Hayatul Anbiya. Kya? Hayatul Anbiya. The life of the prophets fi quburihim, in their graves. This is also a part of the essentials of the creed of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, that we believe that all of the messengers and the prophets of Allah, they are alive in their graves, physically as well as spiritually. And in the limited time that we have, we'll mention proofs and evidences in light of Quran and Sunnah. But before we get to that, understand and know that the view and the belief of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is that all of the Anbiya, the prophets of Allah Almighty, kamo pesh 1,24,000, 124,000 prophets, that they experience death for a moment. Because this is an aspect that people can't get their heads around. That we are saying that the prophets are alive in their graves, but they tasted death. We say what? That the correct understanding is that they tasted death for a moment, for a lamha, to fulfill the promise and the vada of Allah Almighty. That Allah mentions time and again in the Quran, kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, that every soul shall taste death. To fulfill that promise and vada, the Anbiya, the prophets of Allah, tasted death for a mere moment to fulfill the promise of Allah. But that very same Lord and Rabb granted the Anbiya, the prophets of Allah, life again. And today they are alive in their graves. They are what? Bolo bolo, they are alive in their graves. So they tasted death for a mere moment to fulfill the promise, the vada of Allah Almighty, Jalla wa'ala. Allah Almighty then granted them life again. Today they are alive in their graves, just as they were alive whilst on this dunya, whilst on this earth. And not only are they alive in their graves, as we will mention and look at, Allah Almighty arranges for them sustenance, rizq, and they are given the ability to pray as well in their graves. So we can come to this understanding and conclusion that the life of the Anbiya is greater in the grave than it was on the earth. For indeed they are closer to Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala. They have more qurbe ilahi. ठीक है ना? So our brief discussion today is regarding the life of the messengers and the prophets in the grave, which is from amongst the essentials of the and the zururiyat of the aqidah of the Ahli Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Acha. Further to this introduction and understanding, Sadr Shariya, Hazrat Allama Mufti Amjad Ali, Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, they write and mention in the Bahar Shariyat, volume number 1, pages 58 to 60. Ibarat, we'll read the translation to you, that the prophets are alive. The prophets are, bolo bolo, tawajjo koni, the prophets are alive in the same manner that they were alive in the dunya. They are alive in their graves. They eat and drink and go wherever Allah Almighty grants them permission to go. Nothing is beyond the qudra and the power of Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala. Ye to bunyadi aqidah hai na, that Allah Almighty is qadir mutlaq. He is the all powerful. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Ye bar sa Quran with panne hai na, that Allah Almighty is qadir mutlaq. Nothing is beyond His qudra and power. So this shouldn't be something beyond our understanding when our bunyadi aqidah is mazboot, that nothing is beyond the power of Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala. So know that the Anbiya, the prophets of Allah, they are alive in their graves, just as they were alive on this earth. And they eat and drink and go wherever they please. And in order to fulfill the command of Allah, what I've just mentioned, supported by Sadr Shariya in the Bahari Shariyat, they said that in order to fulfill the command of Allah Almighty Jalla wa'ala, that every soul shall taste death. Death came to them for a mere moment, and then they were given life again. Then they were given life again. Ibarat continues. We're going to come to that second part of the discussion and Ibarat in a short while. Further to this, Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Imam Adil Sunnat, Mujaddid Deen of Millat, Maulana Shah Ahmad Riza Khan alayhi rahmat wa ridwan, they write in the Fatawa Rizviya, volume number 29, page number 109, again mentioning the translation of that ibarat, that the one who denies, is jumle par gaur karo, tawajjuh karo, that the one who denies the life of the prophets after they visal, after they leaving this dunya, that person is misguided. And the one who denies the life of the prophets in the qubur, that person is gumrah, misguided. Dal and mudil, apu khud gumrah aur dusre ki bhi gumrah karna hai. That person is misguided and that person is deviant in his beliefs. So this is from amongst the essential beliefs and from amongst the essential creed of the Ahli Sunnati wal Jama'ah, that the Anbiya, the prophets, are alive in their graves. And this is today's discussion. Ye to tamheedi guftagu si na, introduction. We're now clear on what we are discussing. Taking this discussion slightly further. First, looking at evidences from the Quran. The book of Allah Almighty, Jalla wa Ala, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, that book in which there is no doubt. Allah Almighty Jalla wa Ala in the Quran, when we discuss this topic and this aqidah, that the prophets are alive in their blessed graves after their physical veiling from this dunya, the evidences that the ulama mention from the Quran are two. Both linked to the shuhada. Both linked to the tawajjuh hai na? Both linked to the shuhada. First verse is Surah Al-Baqarah Sharif, Surah number 2, verse number 154. The ayat that I recited in the khutbah, ayat that you're all familiar with. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. ये आयत है ना कुरान में, बार बार इमाम साहब ये पढ़ने, मशहूर आयत है. और इसका तर्जमा, وَلَا تَقُولُوا, do not say that those who have been killed in the way of Allah. उन वक़्त को need to do tashri upon shaheed hakiki and shaheed majazi. बतौर इशारा, understand that shaheed is of two types. Shaheed hakiki or shaheed majazi. A shaheed in reality, the one who gives his life on the battlefield to defend the honor of Islam. Uski कहने shaheed hakiki. And then you have shaheed majazi. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned a number of different types of shuhadae majazi, like the one who dies from drowning, uski कहने shaheed. The one who dies whilst defending his house and his family from a robber or a bandit or a chor. He loses his life because of defending his family and his home. That person is classed as a shaheed, but not shaheed hakiki, but shaheed majazi. Samjhne ho fark? So here, understand that Allah Almighty is saying what? That do not say that those who have been killed in the way of Allah. And here referring to both type of shuhada. Shuhadae hakiki and shuhadae majazi. Allah Almighty says that do not say that they are amwat, that they are dead. That they are who? Who? Shuhada. Martyrs. ठीक है ना? Allah said that do not say that the martyrs, the shuhada, are dead. Rather, Allah Almighty says what? Bal ahya'un walakin la tash'urun. Allah Almighty says don't say that they are dead. Rather, they are. Opposite of death is वो जिंदा है ना. Shuhada are zinda. Shuhada Badr dekho, 14 of them in total. All of them today are zinda. Shuhada Uhud dekho, from amongst them Sayyidu Shuhada, Sayyidina Amir Hamza radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, 70 Shuhada Uhud, all of them are zinda, alive today. इसी तरीके से Shuhada Handak dekho, Shuhada Khaybar dekho, and everyone knows Shuhada Karbo Bala dekho. Sayyidu Shuhada Imam Ali Maqam Nawasai Rasul, Sayyiduna Imam Hussain ibn Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, who gave his life to save the religion and the deen of his Nana Jan at Karbala, wo bhi aaj zinda hai. Kaun? Shuhada Karbala aaj zinda hai. Allahu Akbar. Who's telling us this? So Maulana Sahab? Koi Peer Sahab is tariqe naal bayan karne? Imam Sahab khud कहने? नहीं. Allah is saying this in the Quran. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. अच्छा ये एक मकाम पर है. Surah number 2 verse number 154. Or next place where Allah Almighty mentions this. Surah Al Imran. Surah number 3 verse number 169. Tawajjuh hai na? What are we talking about today? The life of the prophets in the grave, and that all of the prophets are alive. Sare bolo, all of the prophets are. Aur ye jumla, is jumle par gaur karo. Ye na samjho that we are alive, and ma'adallah, the Nabi Islam is dead. Aise log hai na, batil i'tiqad, polluting the minds of the masses. Know and understand that we are dead. Nabi Islam is alive. Kya? Nabi Islam is alive. Sayyidi Ala Hazrat gave us our aqidah when they said what? Tu zinda hai wallah. Kya? Tu zinda hai wallah. Tu zinda hai wallah. Mere chashme alam se chup jane wale. Ala Hazrat says, wallahi, by Allah, you are alive. You are alive. But we don't take our aqidah from Ash'ar. Though Sayyidi Ala Hazrat, their kalam and their ash'ar is nature of Quran and Sunnat. Lekin when it comes to discussions of i'tiqad, you have to go towards the asal, towards the source, and that is Quran and Sunnah. Quran to bagair aqidah to nahi is tariqe naal sabit ho sakna. You can't establish aqidah without Nassul Quran or Sahihul Riwayat or ijma' of the Sahaba, A'imma and Ummah. ठीक है, ये बुनियादी इस तरीके नाल गुफ्तगू है. बहरहाल Surah Al Imran, Surah number 3, verse number 169. Allah Almighty takes this discussion one step further. Again talking about the shuhada. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Allah is saying this. Iska tarjama. That do not ever assume. وَلَا تحسبن الذين نون بتعقيد ثقيلة. Those of you who have done basic sarf and nahv will know what I'm talking about. Allah Almighty here emphasizing that do not ever assume. Ye guman nahi rakho, ye soch bhi na rakho. Do not even let this thought cross your mind that those who are being killed in the way of Allah are dead, but rather they are alive. And then Allah Almighty takes the discussion one step further. Not only are they alive, inda rabbihim yurzaqoon. Allah gives them sustenance, rizq as well. Kaun? Shuhada. Kaun? Aja Anbiya ni gal hi nahi hoi na. Gal in the Quran is about who? Allah is talking about who? Shuhada in the Quran. Acha. Then how do we then take this understanding regarding the shuhada in the Quran and apply it to the Anbiya? When you look at the verses of the Quran, you can't just look at them as they are on the apparent bator zahir. Lekin you have to look at what the ulama have written, what the mufassirun have written, what the scholars have said. And under this ayat of the Quran, very quickly, waqt koni to do istiqnal too much of a commentary and tashri upon this. Lekin just to understand that here, Alama Qurtubi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. Kaun? Alama Qurtubi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. They mention and write that al-mautu laysa bi'adamin mahdin wa innama huwa intiqalun min halin ila hal. What do they say? They say that death is not the final stage. Yani, maut is not the akhri lamha. Death is not the final stage. Rather, maut and death is moving from one state to another. Death is what? Ajkal people are afraid of death. I said this before last time as well, in this very same place, that we shouldn't fear death, we should embrace death. Prepare for your death. Apni akhirat ke liye, maut ke liye tiyari karo. So Allama Qurtubi said what? The death is not the final stage. Rather, it is moving from one state to another. And then they say, وَيَدُلُّ عَلَى ذَلِكَ أَنَّ الشُّهَدَاءَ بَعْدَ قَتْلِهِمْ وَمَوْتِهِمْ أَحْيَاءٌ يُرْزَقُونَ. That here, they say that the proof of this is what? That death is not the final stage. They say the proof of this is that the martyrs are alive after their apparent death. And not only are they alive, but they receive sustenance from their Lord. This is what we've just looked at in light of the verses from Surah Baqarah, a verse from Surah Al-Baqarah Sharif and Surah Ali Imran Sharif. And then, Farihina, Mustabshirina, that not only are they alive and receive sustenance from their Lord, but they are happy and they are content. And then Allama Qurtubi said, وَهَذِهِ صِفَةُ الْأَحْيَاءِ فِي الدُّنْيَا. This in reality is a quality, a sifat, an attribute of the living in the dunya. Khush hone ya, is thinking of we are joyous and happy. Then what do they say? This is where they mention and do istidlal, that they take these verses and establish our aqidah that the Anbiya are alive in their grave. Jumle par gaur karo. Allama Qurtubi, they say what? فَإِذَا أو وَإِذَا كَانَ هَذَا فِي الشُّهَدَاءِ فَالْأَنْبِيَاءُ أَحَقُّ بِذَلِكَ وَأَوْلَى. Allama Qurtubi write this. Allama Qurtubi, they say what? That when the martyrs have such a life, that they are alive in their graves, and they are given sustenance by Allah, and they are happy and content, then know and understand that the prophets are more deserving of this. Kya? That the prophets are more deserving of this. Because the maqam of the Anbiya is greater than the maqam of the Shuhada. Ye Quran mein hai na? Hai Quran la parao na? Surah An-Nisa, Surah number 4. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says what? Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says in the Quran, مَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِم مِّنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. Log Quran padhne lekin Quran samjhne hi nahi. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says, Surah number 4, verse number 64. Yes, verse number 64. That whosoever obeys, verse 69. That whosoever obeys Allah and His Rasul, and then upon them is the favor of Allah. Upon them is the favor of Allah. An'ama Allahu alayhim. And they will be in the company of who? Minan Nabiyyin. Tartib dekho. Tartib dekho. Look at the order of the wording here. Minan Nabiyyin. Then who? Was-Siddiqeen. Then who? Was-Shuhada. The Shuhada na kera number hai? Tisra number hai na? The Nabiyyin na kesra number hai? Pehla number. Anbiya first, then Siddiqeen, then Shuhada. Or chotha number? Salihin. وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. And Allah Almighty says, what an excellent company this will be for you on the day of Qiyamah. Therefore, from this we understand what? That if the Shuhada, this is the Nukta point now, if the Shuhada are alive in the grave, and their number is 3 in terms of rank and status, then no doubt those who are higher in rank and status, then automatically they are alive. And this is exactly what Imam Fakhruddin Razi write in their tafsir as well. Dusra call. Imam Razi, they write that the superiority of the prophets over the martyrs is a fact which is accepted and believed. Imam Razi said, لِأَنَّ مَنَازِلَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ فَوْقَ مَنَازِلِ الشُّهَدَاءِ. कोई तवज्जो है? Sorry, आज कोई fireworks नहीं इस तरीके नाल. पिछले हफ्ते drug dealers नहीं खैर ही नहीं सी. आज बकायदा अकीदे नहीं इस्लाह हुई है ना. Log samjhe nahi Ma'azallah Nabi Sallallahu Islam is dead. No, never said this. He is alive. You are dead. And the only way you become alive is when you remember Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Bas. Inhe jana, inhe mana, na rakha ghair se kaam. Kya samjho bas ye sa chalne phirne khane peene to aisa zinda ba. Kuch kakhi nahi. Je namaz na paro, tilawat Quran na karo, Allah aur Allah ke Rasul ka zikr na karo, then do you think you are alive? नाराज नहीं होना ये ना हो इमाम साहब ने आज सारे मरे हुए जुमे पर गए 10 पौंड भी दी और तो मौलवी साहब रो फतवा लायो सारे आज मरे हुए नहीं, ऐसी गल ही नहीं. Lekin what I'm trying to say is that if you want to be alive whilst you are living, then become true rememberers and zakirin of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Acha, I can mention what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has written here. Imam Jalaluddin Asyuti, they write what? That al-anbiya'u awla bidhalika fahum ajallu wa a'zamu. Tisra qawl. Pehle Allama Qurtubi, fair Imam Razi, fair on. Now Imam Jalaluddin Asyuti, they say what? The prophets are more deserving of this. Deserving of what? Their life in the grave. If the shuhada are alive, then the prophets are more deserving of this. And then ultimately they say, why is this? فَهُمْ أَجَلُّ وَأَعْزَمُ. They say because they are more exalted and more superior. They are more exalted and more, Anbiya are more exalted and more superior. Allahu Akbar. और चौथी इस तरीके नाल कॉल पेश करने आ. Fourth statement, कादी सनाउल्लाह पानीपत्ती रहमतुल्लाह अलैह. नाम शायद सुनिया उसी. Great mufassir of the Quran from the Indian subcontinent. They tafsir mazhari. Under this ayat they write that in my opinion, wal haqqu indi admu ihtisasiha bihim bal hayatul anbiya'i aqwa minhum wa ashaddu zuhuran wa atharuha في الخارج حتى لا يجوز النكاح بأزواج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعد وفاته بخلاف الشهيد. ये इबारत है, इसका तर्जुमा पेश करने आ. कादी सनाउल्लाह पानीपत्ती रहमतुल्लाह ताला अलैह, they mention and write in the tafsir mazhari, volume number 1, page number 152. They said that in my opinion, the truth is that this is not only limited to the martyrs. What isn't? Living in the grave, their life in the grave is not only limited to the martyrs. They say rather that the life after the visal, the passing away of the prophets is greater and more powerful, and the visible signs of this are more evident. For example, is par tawajjuh karo, they said that after the physical veiling of a nabi, kitne anbiya san? 1,24,000 kamo pesh, 124,000. They say after the physical veiling of the Nabi, of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam in particular, they say it was not permissible for any of the azwaj mutahharat to marry anyone else. You know this, right? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when they left this dunya in the 11th year after Hijri, only 9 azwaj mutahharat were alive. 2 had left this dunya, Sayyidah Khatijatul Kubra and Sayyidah Maymuna radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. 9 azwaj mutahharat were alive. 9 pure wives were alive, but none of them were allowed to marry anyone. When we die, after 4 months and how many days? 10 days. Iddat period. Our wife, our ex-wife, however you want to term it, she can marry again. But this was not the case with the azwaj mutahharat of Rasulullah. They were not allowed to marry anyone else. From this the ulama mention and write, why were they not allowed to marry anyone else? And they said that the reason why they weren't allowed to marry anyone else is because the Prophet ﷺ is still alive. The Prophet ﷺ is still, and the rishta is still qaim, is still mazboot. समझ रहे हो ना? 20 मिनट आधा घंटा हो गया बकायदा तमहीद पर और दलाइल फ्रॉम द कुरान. ठीक है, और भी दलाइल पेश कर ही सकने आ, लेकिन गल समेटने आ. तवज्जो है ना? गल समेटने आ, चंद अहदीस मुबारक पेश करने आ, फिर इंशाल्लाह सुनता पढ़ने आ. ये रिवायत अबू दाऊद शरीफ की रिवायत है. Are we following the discussion? I've mentioned what our aqidah is. I've mentioned the introduction to the discussion. Then I mentioned 2 verses from the Quran. Surah number 2, verse number 154. Surah number 3, verse number 169. We said that Allah Almighty says that the martyrs are alive in the grave. If the martyrs are alive, then no doubt the Anbiya are alive as well. And we mentioned 4 aqwal of the Mufassirin in relation to what they have said in regards to this particular aqidah and under these verses of the Quran. चंद अहदीस मुबारक पेश करने फिर गल समेटने आ. ये अबू दाऊद शरीफ की रिवायत है. अबू हदीस नंबर 658 650. इस तरीके नाल गुफ्तगू सुनो ना, फिर मजा अच्छा ना, यानी दलाइल के साथ, with proofs and evidences. जे वैसे हो जी that we believe that the prophets are alive in their graves, शायद बच्चा will accept. क्यों बाप आखना है Shayad Shagird will accept you Ustad Akhna hai. Shayad Murid will accept because Pir Sahib is saying it. Lekin mazid ki gal ule honi hai jile dalail ke saath guftagu aur gal karo na. This is why Qaida of Rashidiyya is what? Ad-da'wa bila dalilin ghayru masmu'in. That a da'wah, a claim, without any proofs or evidence is not listened to. We can shout on the top of our voices until the cows come home that the prophets are alive. But jab tak you don't present proofs and evidences from Quran and Sunnah, then nobody is going to take your da'wah seriously. Are we following? वक्त को नहीं उन्हें इतनी लंबी तशरीह करा लेकिन अबू दाऊद शरीफ की रिवायत हदीस शरीफ सुनो ईमान ताज़ा करो अकीदा पुख्ता करो ये रिवायत no doubt you would have heard of before Hazrat Aus bin Aus radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is the rawi that qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam inna min afdali ayyamikum yawm al-jumu'ati. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the most excellent and the most virtuous of your days is the day of Jumu'ah. Afdalul ayyam. The most virtuous and excellent of days. Why? Have you ever thought why this day is the most excellent? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave us the reasons. Fihi khulika Adam. On this day, who was created? Takhliq Adam took place on this day. Wa fihi kubita. And not only was Adam born on this day, but Adam Alayhi Salam also left his dunya on a Friday as well. Agri gal. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, wa fihi nafkhatu. That also on this particular day, the trumpet will be blown. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us the trumpet will be blown by Hazrat Sayyiduna Israfil alayhi salam on Friday the 10th of Muharram. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us the day, he told us the date, he told us the month. The only thing he didn't tell us was the year. In this there is prophetic wisdom as well. Fir kya? Fourth reason why this day is the best of days, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, this is the day that all of creation will swoon, yani fall unconscious. فَأَكْفِرُوا عَلَيَّ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ فِيهِ. Tawajjuh hai na? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said what? That on this day, which day? Friday. On this day, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, increase your durood and salawat upon me. Aye. Sare bolo sallallahu, aur fir bolo sallallahu. ये सब तो बारीक दुरूद शरीफ है ना और एक दुरूद शरीफ कितनी नेकियां बोलो कितनी नेकियां 10 नेकियां कितने गुनाह माफ होने 10 गुनाह कितने दरजात बुलंद होने 10 दरजात फिर बोलो सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम فإن صلاتكم معروضة علي. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, why Friday? Why not Monday? Why not Wednesday? Why not Thursday? Why on a Friday? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, increase your durood and salawat upon me on a Friday. Why? Because your durood and salawat are presented to me. Your durood and salawat are that Fulan bin Fulan, such and such, who is the son of such and such. Ya Rasulullah, this is how much durood sharif is read on you. This is how much salawat is read upon you. Acha, fir agli gal mazedi gal. Ye aqeeda hai. Abu Dawud Sharif ki riwayat. 658 is the hadith sharif. Uda kutub al-ahadith do nakal of this riwayat as well. That Sahaba Ikram, Qurban jaw upon the Sahaba, they said what? That kayfa tu'radu salatuna alayka wa qad arimta yaqulu balita. That Ya Rasulullah, Ya Habiballah, whilst you are alive, we understand that this is possible. That you are in Medina Sharif, somebody in Yemen, one of your ummatis sends Durood Sharif upon you, Malaika Baqaida, or you yourself become aware of who has sent you Durood Sharif upon you. But how will this be possible when you will be in the grave? Allahu Akbar. Qurban jaw upon the Sahaba Ikram for saying and asking this question, that how will our blessings be shown to you when your body has decayed? To which the Prophet ﷺ said, tawajjuh hai na? जुमले पर गौर करो, ये मेरे अल्फाज नहीं, ये हुजूर के अल्फाज हैं. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said what? That inna Allah azza wa jalla harrama ala al-ardi ajsad al-anbiya. Hi, akhir subhanallah. What did Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam say? That indeed Allah has made it haram upon the earth. Allah has made it haram upon the earth, unlawful upon the zameen, to consume the flesh of the anbiya. Subhanallah. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is telling you and me that the earth is forbidden from consuming the flesh of the anbiya. इस पर भी तशरीह करी सकते हैं. अगली रिवायत क्यों चार में अकवाल पेश किते हैं of the mufassirin in light of the two verses. चार अहादीस पेश करने हैं फिर सुनता पढ़ने हैं. इसी तरीके से दूसरी रिवायत मुस्लिम अबी याला शरीफ की रिवायत. मुस्लिम अबी याला, ठीक है. ये इमाम अबू याला इमाम बुखारी के उस्ताद सन. इमाम Bukhari ke ustad san. Or Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, they write, Rijalu Abi Ya'la thiqatun, that all of the narrators in Abu Ya'la Sharif, they are reliable. All of them are reliable. Narrators jirena. Rijal, they're all thiqat, they are reliable. Riwayat kya hai? Ravi kaun? Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Riwayat ye hai, alfaz of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wazih taur, categorically Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says what? Al-anbiya'u ahya'un fi quburihim yusalluna. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says what? That the prophets are alive in their graves, and not only are they alive, but they also pray to Allah Almighty as well. अगली रिवायत पेश करने समेटने गल इसी तरीके से यानी अल इसरा वल मिराज. I could have sat here and done the bayan of the full journey, जिस तरह हर मुकर्रिर हर इस तरीके नाल आलिम दीन will do on this occasion, on this Jummah, if not today then certainly next Friday. But I thought I'll give you something beneficial, that अपना अकीदा कम अज कम पुख्ता हो जाना. तो जो इस तो बाद भी नहीं अकीदा पुख्ता हो गया तो फिर वो गल खत्म अल्लाह अला कुलूबिहिम व अला समीहिम व अला अबसारिहिम गिशावतुम व लहुम अज़ाबुन अज़ीम. ये रिवायत क्या है? ये भी सही मुस्लिम शरीफ की रिवायत है. अतैतु अला मूसा लैलत उसरिया बी इंद अल कसीब अल अहमरी. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that was on the journey to Al-Aqsa. What was the animal that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was upon? Buraq. Whilst on the Buraq, on the way to Al-Aqsa, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said what? I happened to pass by which prophet? Musa alayhi salam. Which prophet? Musa alayhi salam. And what happened? وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ يُصَلِّي فِي قَبْرِهِ. Ye huzur ke alfaz hai. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said Musa alayhi salam was standing. So this standing, if I'm standing now, is this me standing with my body or my spirit? Bolo bolo. Jism hai na? Saat ruh hai na? Then I can stand. So what does Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam say? That he passed by Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam was? So this tells us what? That are the prophets alive spiritually in the grave or physically? Physically. Standing can only be done with the body. For ugly gal, not only was Musa alayhi salam standing in his grave, yusalli fi qabrihi, he was also praying in his grave as well. Allahu Akbar walillahi alhamd. ये त्रै रिवायतें हो गई. आखिरी रिवायत पेश करने गल समेटने when Yazid attacked al-Madinatul Munawwara. Yazid जानियो ना, पलीत लाइन, when he attacked al-Madinatul Munawwara. This was after Karbala. He placed certain restrictions on the adhan being called in Masjid Nabi Sharif. That he just was responsible for the martyrdom of the Nawasa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Gharana of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had many atrocities that he committed. He stopped the adhan from being called in Masjid Nabi Sharif for 3 days. ये historical बात है और ये आखिरी बात है. Imam Jalaluddin As-Suyuti do naql of this in the Al-Hawa lil Fatawa, and they say that when the adhan was not called in Masjid Nabi Sharif for 3 days, then the Sahaba Ikram and the Tabi'een, गौर है ना, जुमले पर गौर करो, that the Sahaba Ikram and the Tabi'een, they heard the adhan being called from inside the blessed grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ye alfazan, the Hazrat Sa'id bin Musayyib, he says, وَمَا يَأْتِي وَقْتُ صَلَاةٍ إِلَّا سَمِعْتُ الْأَذَانَ مِنَ الْقَبْرِ. That whenever the time of the prayer would come, we would hear the adhan coming from inside the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bas, this is why Allah Hazrat said what? Tu zinda hai wallah. Sare bolo. Tu zinda hai wallah. Tu zinda hai wallah. Mere chashme alam se chup jane wale. Bas. And Quran does faisla upon this as well. That an-nabiyyu awla bil mu'minina min anfusihim. That the Prophet of Allah, he is closer to the believers than themselves. Like I said earlier, I will emphasize this again. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is alive today. We are dead. We are dead. We only become alive when we remember him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bas. Build your connection, build your nisbat, build your ta'alluq with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was without even going into what the ulama have said and written. And other ahadith mubarakah that we could have mentioned. Like sare aqlmand baithe ho. If after this you still don't understand, then you can see me after.
يا إمام رسل يا سندي أنت باب الله معتمدي فبدنياي وآخرتي يا رسول الله خذ بيدي